Good morning. Good morning. I was on my way to work to the office today, but I saw a video last night and I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. I know a lot of people are starting to have comments about it, on social media, but and I usually don't do a lot of reaction videos and things like that. It's just not, that's not usually my cup of tea. I kind of stay in my lane, like with what I do as an intimacy coach and a therapist. But I would say with this particular video that I saw, I thought it would be really great for me to do a video just because I had a huge interest in the topics that are kind of coming up out of this video and being discussed. So one of those topics is obviously church, growing up in church. And then also I'm going to talk a little bit about the intimacy component of all of this, and then also the therapeutic component of this video. So for those who are unaware, there's a church by the name of True Vine in Hampton, Virginia. And what I want to do is start off by saying, believe it or not, I follow this church on social media. I started following them probably like about a little under a year ago. And I started following them because I saw a viral video of the pastor. He was singing, or I think just kind of like marching to the beat of a song, going down the aisle with some other ministers behind him, and he was grooving. So what attracted me to that video and made me go a little deeper and find their Instagram page was because the church really kind of resembled the church I grew up in. Just everything from the colors of the church and the pews and the way the choir marches in when they're singing the songs, and just that whole vibe and energy, of the church. And it kind of brought back some fond memories, of when I was a kid, growing up in church as well. And I also grew up in a family church. And so I was looking at that and I was like, oh, just it kind of again brought some fond memories. So I just started following them. And then I looked at some more videos, and they had a lot more videos of the choir singing and different things like that. I've never really heard the pastor of the church, Pastor Jackson's preaching per se. I just saw what they were sharing on social media. For the most part was the music ministry aspect of it, because I think, to my knowledge, I think I read that the pastor has a music ministry background. So you'll see if you follow him, he's singing, he's playing like various instruments. I think he's gotten on the keyboard, the drums. They have a band at their church that's, really good. And you can just see the connection of the people there. Like they genuinely look like they are enjoying their time together as kind of like this smaller family church. This is definitely not a mega church or anything like that. Definitely a smaller church. They look like they probably have maybe roughly around maybe 100, maybe 200 if I push it, but I think more so like around 100 members at their church. So again, it reminded me a lot of, when I was growing up in church as well. And to be honest, when I've actually commented on a couple of videos too, and was like, this reminds me so much of, the church that I grew up in. And a lot of people were saying the same thing, like, oh, I miss church being like this and this, that, and the third, and, all of that. So in a nutshell, True Vine has had a very positive following for a very long time. Let's just say that. But now here comes this video, right? And for those who may not know this part, so the video that has gone viral is Pastor Jackson having a young woman in the church, young teenager. I don't know how old she is, but obviously she's not married, and I think she's still a minor. And she gets up in front of the church and in front of the, I guess, the communion table, if that's what they have right there in the front. And she speaks to the entire church about how she is sorry that she is pregnant. She apologizes literally to everyone in the church. And that's pretty much it. She doesn't talk too long, at least from what I saw in the video. It's almost like it was kind of scripted, like this is what you say if you step outside of the boundaries of what we represent. and then she's sat down. Okay, so that's that part. And then the pastor gets up behind her and he adds a little bit more commentary saying, basically, this is what we need to do when, people are, I guess, outside of the will of God, so to speak. And then he kind of goes into a little bit more commentary about we're not going to celebrate, children out of wedlock, and we would not be having baby showers for her. Now, in my mind, I thought at first he was saying we're not going to have a baby shower at the church. So I'm like, okay, if that's how y'all run the church, then that's how y'all run the church. But then he further goes into talking about, no, she shouldn't be having any baby showers at all. And you all should not even be going to a baby shower if someone throws her one. So now he's telling the congregation, we are not going to participate in this sin. And he also kind of goes on to say, and basically in so many words, like, if you do, you kind of need to take that up with me, the leader of this church. And I'll be honest, I was sitting there like, oh, I just kind of was like, oof. And not because I've never seen that before. Again, I grew up in the church, like deep in it. I was definitely like almost like a Sunday to Sunday type of kid. That was my upbringing. I'm very familiar with that structure of how they do church, so to speak. And so I will say to some degree, it did not surprise me. I think the part that was a little bit more surprising is that that form of like this public display of what we're not supposed to do. I haven't seen that in years, probably like decades. And so I was actually kind of surprised to see it in 2025. But at the same time, I kind of wasn't surprised that it came from that particular church, because again, I follow them on social media. So if you follow them, or if you don't have any idea, like when you look at their page, just the songs that they're singing, they're not very much into the whole like new age church, new age thinking. They're very old school. I think at one time I saw them wearing choir robes. The ladies all have on skirts that are definitely below the knees, like for real, for real. And the women, I don't even think I've seen anyone with like short hair or anything like mine. A lot of them have, like longer hair. And then they also have like these lace type of coverings that go over their hair, like all of them. Every single woman and girl in that church is dressed that way. I've even seen a video when they were at a choir rehearsal at the church, and still they all had on long blue jean skirts, that were very much past the knees, more so around the calves, ankles, type of thing. So to some degree, I wasn't surprised that this happened. I was kind of a little taken aback that this is still happening in 2025. And then on top of that, it was recorded. Obviously, they record all of their, services and different things like that. So I'm not surprised by that, but that particular segment of the service was recorded, and now that's out there for everyone to see. So that will follow this young woman for the rest of her life, which is tough. That's the word that's coming to mind. That's tough. I'm not sure what that's going to look like for her later on in her life, but just the fact that now this is a digital blueprint, or footprint, should I say, digital footprint that's out there now of her having to share with all of these people of intimate details of her life. So that part was kind of, a little sad to watch, and a little tough to watch. And so when I think about all of these things, so I think about my own upbringing. Like I said, I grew up in a church very similar. Women and girls could not wear pants in church. And honestly, a lot of the members didn't even wear like pants sometimes outside of church. My household was more so a little bit more balanced, where, my mom did not allow my sister and I to wear pants at church, nor any church functions, unless it was like roller skating or something. But when we would go to school or any other time of the day or something like that, we could wear pants. My mom was very adamant about us not listening to what they call worldly music, anything outside of gospel music, for sure on Sundays. Like on Sundays that's in our household was considered the Sabbath, and we did not, there was no work on those days. There was no even washing clothes. We didn't clean up the house. We cleaned up the house on Saturdays. We observed Sunday as the Sabbath, and we would go to church pretty much all day. And we couldn't even go to like birthday parties or any kind of gatherings or anything like that on Sundays, because that was totally out. And that's how we were raised. And even with that part of it, you know, and I'll go even deeper when it comes to like a little bit more intimate details. As a young girl growing up in the church that I grew up in, and how we were raised in our household, and like a little bit more of the older traditional type upbringing. One thing my mom didn't allow us to do was we couldn't wear red nail polish. We couldn't wear red lip gloss or lipstick. We couldn't even wear red underwear. Like we couldn't wear colors like that. It only could be white and beige, you know. And I know talking about it now in 2025, some people are like, oh my God, you know. But that's how we were raised, and that's what we knew. And so I say all of that to say is that for that particular church, that is the expectation. I'm not excusing it, nor am I saying I agree with it. I'm telling you that's the expectation of that church. From what I know, I don't think that that church is going out telling other people how to do church. They just have their way of doing church, and the people that are there all are in agreement with it. But then you have minors who are in the church, and they're growing up in that type of church, legalistic type of church, and then they're also a part of everyday living. Now, I don't know if any of these kids are like homeschooled or if they go to public school or anything like that, but they're gonna still get exposure to other things outside of the church. And that's the balancing act, right? Like how do you maintain whatever your standards might be in your church and your expectations, but then also trying to combat the things of the world. And so for myself, when I think of church, when I think of my own upbringing, I contribute a lot of things about myself to the church, like positive things. Like I always say, my public speaking skills, they come from church. So for a lot of us who grew up in churches like that, you were thrusted in the sense in the limelight. You're going to teach Sunday school. You're going to get up and sing a song or direct choir. You're going to be an usher. You're going to collect the offering. You're going to get up and speak. You're going to do a sermon. Like these were all the things. And there was no real teaching on that per se. You were just thrown up there to say, go try it and figure it out. Now, I'm not saying that that's the best route to take. I'm just saying for me, that actually benefited me in a lot of ways. Okay. And then also, I will say, even though I don't necessarily align or agree with a lot of the things, I do attribute the way that I carry myself, you know, in certain spaces and environments. I contribute that, you know, to my own personal upbringing in the church. So that part, I do understand. And then so what I was looking at with this video, the part that I feel was challenging for me, you know, just to kind of like, I guess, kind of deal with is the fact that, yes, your church has standards, and yes, there are expectations, especially as you're trying to teach the younger people growing up in this society where a lot of things are pretty much free for all, and it's very liberal, and there's a lot of distractions, and there's a lot of choices and options to do so many things. The church is kind of trying to, I don't want to say battle against that, but in a sense they are. And so with that being said, certain measures, maybe they feel, again, I'm just assuming, so I don't know, maybe they feel that certain measures have to be taken to kind of keep the youth away from certain lifestyles where it can be maybe teen pregnancy, drugs and alcohol, like the typical stuff, you know, things like that. And maybe they feel extreme measures is to focus on these certain guidelines and these rules, and then choosing to use biblical scriptures to back it up, possibly. I'm no Bible scholar, so I'm not going to speak on, you know, any of that. But that's what I'm thinking. If I had to just sit back and observe on the outside looking in, I'm thinking that's probably the approach that they're taking. Now, again, what my concern is, a few things. That's such an intimate thing that has happened with that young girl. And for me, I don't know if that's something that I would be comfortable. Well, it's not, I don't know. I know for sure I would not be comfortable if I was a leader of an organization or a church putting a child who is still learning and developing in front of a whole bunch of adults and telling them to apologize about an intimate act that occurred in the privacy of wherever she was at. If I was very much a stickler about how we run our church and what the expectations are, then for me personally, I would have called a meeting with the young girl and her parents, and possibly the young boy if he was a member of the church. If he's not a member of the church and he has no connection to it, then it's not much that can be done there. That's something that the parents would have to do on their own time. But for me as a leader, I would ask them to, come to my office or something like that, and I would reiterate the expectations of the church, and this is what we stand for, and this is what we do. Because of that, if you have gotten pregnant and you're not married, then per our expectations of our church and what's written or stated and whatever our bylaws are, whatever, you don't fall in line with that. And so with that being said, you may not necessarily have this position in church anymore or this role. You may have to sit out, until the baby is born or whatever. Again, I don't run a church, nor do I have a desire to. So I can't really speak on that. But that's something that I feel like could have been done in a way that's not excusing the behavior. But I think it could possibly be more effective down the line if it was handled in that way. Now, presently, it's being handled because she's being sat down and whatever is going on. But down the line, I'm just thinking about what I've seen, what I've witnessed of other people I've gone to church with, and I've experienced, friendships with people who have been very deep in the church, and I see the lasting effects of what they experienced in church, what people are kind of like terming these days church hurt. And a lot of that is typically public humiliation, shame, a disdain, disowning, people. And from a human experience, those things can definitely have some long-term effects, mentally, physically, spiritually, all of the things. We just don't know how that's going to play out. But I'm not sure if people were mainly angry about the video because it was done in front of people, it was done at all. I'm not sure. Tell me your thoughts about what really made you angry about that particular video. I can honestly say I'm not angry. And the reason why I'm not angry is because I don't attach too much feeling to that unless I saw someone physically being abused, neglected. Now, from a mental standpoint, I think it's extremely sad because I'm thinking about the possibilities of where it could go. But then again, I don't know the trajectory of that young woman's life or the rest of, the congregation and how they dealt with that. Who knows? It could have been some people after that video that went to the church that say, you know what, I think I'm done with this. I don't think I can do this anymore. And they could have left. Who knows? I don't know. But my biggest concern was just like, how do we handle issues like these? Because again, you have the spiritual realm of things and your religious views. But again, we're still human beings, we're spiritual beings having these human experiences. And how do you handle when you have done something that maybe other people don't approve of? That's a teachable moment to me. Instead of just publicly shaming someone, I think that's a teachable moment to say, hey, there are going to be things in life that as you're learning on this journey, you may do a lot of things that aren't the best decision for your life. You may do a lot of things that's going to upset other people and make them feel uncomfortable. How are you going to deal with that? I think those are real conversations. And then too, for myself as an intimacy coach and a therapist, this is something that I'm very passionate about in terms of like even getting involved in churches more from the aspect of teaching true like intimacy and true sex education for our youth so that they can understand, how to navigate these spaces. I'm very fortunate, I believe, because yeah, I grew up in church. I grew up with like structure and accountability and different things like that. But I also had a balance of a mom who was a school teacher, and so she was around children a lot and understood a lot of child development. And that was very helpful, to me. And she always created a safe space for my sister and I to be able to talk about our feelings and our thoughts, um, and to not feel like the things that we were experiencing were quote unquote wrong. She created a space for us to really actively talk about it. And I think, personally, I think that's needed a lot more in church, especially when it comes to like sex, and intimacy. Even with adults, that's needed. Like, there are adults that don't even feel comfortable talking about sex very openly and candidly. And yes, the church honors marriage, but then like ain't nobody teaching you how to navigate, these things that comes up in your marriage when it comes to sex. That's a problem, And so I think just shunning someone and sitting them down, again, I don't know because I don't go there, but without the proper sex education following that, I think does not, benefit this young lady and even other members in the church long term. So, like I said, again, I've been following the church on Instagram for quite some time, and I always kind of smile when I see, them in the church. And part of that, I think, for me, probably won't change because it reminds me a lot of when I was growing up. And I have fond memories of my childhood in church because a lot of my family went to my church, and my family are like my friends. And that's where I learned a lot. That was like a big foundation for me. So I don't have any ill will, My biggest thing, I feel like if we're going to complain about something, how can we be a part of the solution, right? And I would say for myself, how I feel like I could be a part of the solution is just consistently being, I guess, like a vessel for like people who want to have more information and real education around sex and intimacy, especially in the church, so that people do not feel shame about what naturally comes to us. Sex is very natural. And the simple fact that that young woman is experiencing all of these different things, that's natural. All of that, like all of the feelings. And those are the types of things in churches. I don't know too much about the present day churches because I'm not a member at a church and I don't subscribe to any religious ideologies, at all right now. And so I just think the part that we're missing is that people still need education. Like you just can't discipline or punish them and then that's it. You really need to kind of teach them things, teach them more about their bodies. Because I think, honestly, for myself, especially have been a school social worker for years, I'm like, just teaching kids about sex is so important because they don't know. Now, biologically, they're going to do what they do because they can't help it. They're humans. They're going to have desires. They're going to be aroused. They're going to connect with other people and want to have sex, but do they really understand their bodies? And do they understand all of the things that comes with, having sex? So I think that part is being missed. Again, I don't know because I don't go to the church and I don't know what's done behind closed doors and if there was education that was provided to the young lady. But that's my way of saying, how can I contribute? I know I saw a lot of people online saying, what's her Cash App and where does she live? And I want to send her stuff for a baby shower. But I do I want you all to keep this in mind. A lot of you all probably had never even heard of the church before this went viral, right? And if for some reason that pastor decided to get online and say, hey, we got a young lady in the church, she's pregnant, and obviously that's not necessarily our beliefs, but we want to make sure that she's well taken care of. So if you all out there in the stratosphere can send something to bless her, please do. How many of you all really would? Right? Are you doing it now out of spite? Because it's more so I'm angry, I'm in an uproar, and I remember that happened to me, and I hate this stuff, and that's why I can't stand the way the world is now and people's views and stuff. So I'm going to send her all the money. But would you have done it if you didn't know any of that stuff? Just to do it, just to help her. So it's just something to kind of think about. And there are more ways that we can contribute to this, you know, shift in mindset when it comes to the legalistic views of church, more than just doing a virtual baby shower for her. What are some other ways that we can support even the pastor, even when you're angry with him and you like, that is not the way, I don't think that's how things are supposed to be done, I don't think that's what the Bible says, and this, that, and the third. But how can we show up and still say, you know what, I'm not in agreement with what you did or how you handled that with that young lady, but if there's a way that I can contribute to your ministry to help out the other youth in the church who may be dealing with the same thing. Maybe you all just don't know about it. Maybe they've gotten abortions. Maybe they've just never gotten caught. Right? Really, a lot of these types of environments don't really teach anything. When we shun people and shame people, that doesn't teach people anything. It just teaches them how to hide it better. For real. That's just the truth. It teaches them how to maneuver and hide it better. And honestly, a lot of churches are based upon that, doing a lot of things in secret. Because quite honestly, when that happened to that young girl and she was made an example of, trust and believe all the other people in that congregation that got some other stuff going on behind the scenes. If they do, they just know how to hide it. So that's my thoughts on that. Definitely wishing, much love and a safe and speedy delivery for the young lady when she delivers her child. And I hope that she is blessed with so much, not just the things, but that she grows into an amazing young woman and has a very beautiful, fulfilling, and flourishing life. And I really hope that the church will also have a shift in mindset and think about it from the standpoint of how can we still represent Christ, if that's your views, but then also how can we make sure that the congregation are educated on everyday things so that they can make the best decisions for themselves, for their family, and to even represent their church. So those are my thoughts on that. I'd love to hear what you all have to say.